The sun hadn't even broken over the horizon when Private First Class Sarah Martinez reported for duty at Gate 7 of Fort Henderson Army Base in rural Georgia. The air was thick with southern humidity, and the cicadas were already singing their morning chorus. Sarah adjusted her helmet and stood at attention beside the small guardhouse, her M4 rifle held with practiced ease across her chest. She was 24 years old, 5'4", and weighed barely 120 pounds soaking wet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes scanned the empty road ahead with the kind of focus that came from real training and real commitment. But to the men in her unit, she was just the girl who got stuck with gate duty. "Morning, Martinez," Sergeant Dick Kowalski called out as he pulled up in his truck. He was a thick-necked man in his 40s with a beer gut that strained against his uniform. His buddy, Corporal James Lynch, sat in the passenger seat, both of them grinning like they'd already heard the punchline to a joke Sarah wasn't in on. "Morning, Sergeant," Sarah replied crisply, stepping forward to check their IDs even though she knew exactly who they were. Kowalski laughed, a mean sound that had no warmth in it. "You actually gonna check our IDs, sweetheart? What, you think we're terrorists?" Lynch joined in the laughter. "Come on, Sarah, you know who we are. Or is this your first day playing soldier?" Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. "Protocol is protocol, Sergeant. ID, please." Kowalski rolled his eyes dramatically and fished out his military ID, slapping it into Sarah's outstretched hand with more force than necessary. "This is exactly why they shouldn't put girls on gate duty. No common sense, just following the little rule book like a schoolgirl." Sarah examined the ID, checked it against her roster, and handed it back without a word. She waved them through. As Kowalski's truck rolled past, she heard Lynch say loudly enough for her to hear, "I give her 2 more days before she quits. Gate duty is boring as hell. She'll probably cry and ask for a transfer to some cushy admin job." The truck disappeared into the base and Sarah returned to her post. She'd heard worse. Much worse. Sarah had grown up in a small town in New Mexico, the daughter of a single mother who worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. Her father had been Army, killed in Afghanistan when Sarah was just 6 years old. She barely remembered him, but she remembered the flag they'd given her mother at the funeral. She remembered the way her mother had folded that flag every single night and placed it on the mantel like it was made of gold. When Sarah turned 18, she'd enlisted. Her mother had cried, but she'd also understood. The Army was in Sarah's blood. It was her legacy, her purpose, the thing that made her feel connected to the father she'd never really known. Basic training had been hell. The physical challenges she could handle. She'd been running and working out since high school preparing for this. But the mockery, the constant comments about her size, her gender, her right to even be there, that had been harder than any obstacle course. Still, she'd graduated. She'd qualified as a sharpshooter. She'd excelled in combat training. And she'd requested assignment to Fort Henderson because it was a forward operating support base with real strategic importance. She wanted to matter. She wanted to serve. Instead, they'd put her on gate duty. "It's a crucial position," her commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, had told her with barely concealed condescension. "Someone has to do it, and you're perfect for it." Nice and visible. Good for optics, Sarah had wanted to scream. She hadn't joined the Army for optics. But she'd saluted, said yes, sir, and reported to Gate 7. That had been 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of 12-hour shifts checking IDs, inspecting vehicles, and enduring the mockery of nearly every soldier who passed through. The men joked that gate duty was where the Army put people who couldn't handle real work. They called it parking lot patrol and the kindergarten shift. And because Sarah was the only woman assigned to gate rotation at Fort Henderson, the jokes had an extra edge to them. "Heard they put Barbie on gate duty," one private had laughed as he drove through. "Better than letting her touch a real weapon," his buddy had replied. Sarah had said nothing. She'd learned that responding only made it worse. So she stood her post, checked her IDs, logged her vehicles, and did her job with exactness and precision that would have made her father proud. But today felt different. Sarah couldn't put her finger on it exactly, but something in the air felt wrong. She'd learned to trust her instincts during training. Her hand-to-hand combat instructor, a grizzled veteran named Sergeant Major Chen, had told her that warriors develop a sixth sense about danger. "Your body knows before your brain figures it out," he'd said. "Don't ignore that feeling. Sarah wasn't ignoring it now. She checked her watch. 06:15. The morning shift change would bring more traffic soon. She walked the perimeter of the gate area, her eyes scanning the tree line about 200 yards out. Fort Henderson wasn't in a war zone. This was rural Georgia, surrounded by farmland and forest. But it was still a military installation with weapons, equipment, and personnel that could be targets. She thought about the security briefing from last week. There had been mentions of increased chatter among domestic extremist groups, some anti-government types making noise online about targeting military installations. But the briefing had been vague, and most of the soldiers had seemed bored during it. Sarah hadn't been bored. She'd listened to every word. Now, standing at her post as the sun finally crested the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah felt that prickling sensation on the back of her neck grow stronger. Something was coming. She just didn't know what. By 0800, the morning rush was in full swing. Cars lined up at Gate 7 as soldiers, contractors, and civilian employees showed their IDs and waited for Sarah to wave them through. Most were polite enough, if dismissive. A few were outright rude. "You gonna take all day, honey?" one contractor asked, drumming his fingers on his steering wheel. "Some of us got real work to do." Sarah handed back his credentials and gestured him through without comment. Specialist Marcus Webb was assigned as her partner for the morning shift. He was a lanky 20-year-old from Ohio who treated gate duty like a paid vacation. He spent most of his time on his phone, leaning against the guardhouse, barely looking up when vehicles approached. "You know you don't have to be so intense about this, right?" Marcus said around 10 o'clock, watching Sarah conduct a thorough inspection of a delivery truck. "It's just gate duty. Nobody's attacking Fort Henderson." "Maybe not," Sarah replied, checking the undercarriage of the truck with her inspection mirror. "But if they did, we're the first line of defense," Marcus laughed. "First line of defense? Sarah, we're the people they didn't trust with important jobs. This is where they put soldiers they don't know what to do with." The truck driver looked annoyed. "Lady, I deliver here twice a week. Same truck, same cargo. You've checked me a dozen times." Sarah ignored him and finished her inspection. Everything was clean. She waved him through. "You're gonna make enemies acting like that," Marcus warned. "People already think you're trying too hard. Like you've got something to prove." Sarah turned to face him. "I do have something to prove. Every single day. And so do you, whether you know it or not." Marcus shrugged and went back to his phone. Around 11:30, Sarah noticed the van. It was a white commercial van, slightly beaten up, with mud splattered on the license plate. Not unusual in itself. Plenty of contractors and delivery services used vans like that. But this one was driving slowly on the access road that ran parallel to the base fence, about 100 yards out. Sarah watched it through her binoculars. The van slowed even more as it approached the section of fence nearest to Gate 7, then sped up slightly and continued on. 5 minutes later, it came back. Same slow approach, same acceleration. "Marcus," Sarah called. "You see that van?" Marcus barely glanced up. "What van?" "White commercial van. It's been passed here twice, slowing down near the fence line." "So?" "Probably some lost delivery driver." "Maybe." Sarah kept her binoculars trained on the road. "I'm going to log it anyway." "Suit yourself." Sarah documented the time, the description of the van, and the behavior she'd observed. Something about it bothered her. The third time the van passed, she got a partial on the license plate and wrote that down too. When Sergeant Kowalski came through the gate around noon, Sarah flagged him down. "Sergeant, I need to report a suspicious vehicle." Kowalski sighed like she'd just asked him to solve a complicated math problem. "What now, Martinez?" "White commercial van driving past the perimeter repeatedly. Slowing down near the fence. I've observed it 3 times in the past hour." Kowalski stared at her. "A van? Driving on a public road?" "Yes, Sergeant, but the behavior pattern is suspicious. It's the same vehicle and it keeps—" "Martinez." Kowalski's voice was hard. "Do you know how many vehicles drive past this base every single day? Hundreds, thousands. You want me to report every single white van in Georgia?" "No, Sergeant, but this one—" "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Kowalski looked at Marcus, who was wisely staying out of it. "This is what happens when you put someone on a post they're not ready for. They see threats everywhere because they're paranoid and jumpy." Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not paranoid, Sergeant. I'm observing genuine suspicious behavior and reporting it as per protocol." "Protocol." Kowalski said the word like it tasted bad. "You know what your protocol should be? Check IDs. Wave cars through. Don't bother the rest of us with every little thing that makes you nervous. Sergeant, that's enough, Private. You're dismissed from this conversation. Do your job and stop wasting my time. Kowalski drove off, leaving Sarah standing there with her jaw clenched so tight it ached. Marcus whistled low. Told you. Making enemies. Sarah didn't respond. She went back to her post and continued watching the road. The van didn't come back. Maybe Kowalski was right. Maybe she was seeing things that weren't there. Maybe she was just a paranoid girl trying too hard to prove she belonged. But that feeling in her gut didn't go away. At 1400 hours, Sarah's shift was supposed to end, but Specialist Rodriguez called in sick, and they needed someone to cover Gate 7 until the evening shift. Captain Reynolds asked for volunteers, and before Sarah could even consider it, Sergeant Kowalski spoke up. Martinez can do it. She loves gate duty so much, let her pull a double. It wasn't a request, so Sarah stayed. By 1600 hours, her feet ached and her head was pounding from the heat. The afternoon traffic had died down. Marcus had been replaced by Private First Class Danny Morrison, a quiet guy from Tennessee who at least did his job without complaining. Sarah was logging a routine vehicle inspection when Danny called out, "Hey Sarah, that the van you were worried about?" Sarah's head snapped up. There it was, the same white van now parked on the access road about 75 yards from the fence. Just sitting there, engine running, visible exhaust in the afternoon air. That's it, Sarah confirmed. She grabbed her radio. Gate 7 to command. I have a suspicious vehicle parked near the perimeter fence. Requesting guidance, the radio crackled. Gate 7. Describe the vehicle. Sarah gave the description, the location, the license plate number she'd managed to get earlier. There was a long pause. Then, Gate 7 will send someone to check it out. Maintain your post. Acknowledged. But 20 minutes passed and no one came. The van sat there, engine running. Sarah could feel her heart rate increasing. Every instinct she had was screaming that something was wrong. I'm going to call it in again, she told Danny. Sarah, they said they'd send someone. That was 20 minutes ago. She radioed again. This time she got Sergeant Kowalski's voice, annoyed and sharp. Martinez, we heard you the first time. We've got it under control. Stop clogging the radio with your paranoid fantasies. Sergeant, the van is still there. It's been parked for... I said we've got it under control. Stay on your post and stop bothering command. That's an order. The radio went dead. Sarah lowered it slowly, staring at the van. Danny looked uncomfortable. Maybe they're right, he said quietly. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe, Sarah said. But she didn't believe it. At 17:15, the van's side door slid open. Sarah's hand went to her rifle instantly. Danny, eyes on that van, now. Danny grabbed his binoculars. I see it. Doors open. I see someone inside, movement. Sarah's breathing slowed, her training taking over. Get on the radio. Tell them. That's when she saw it. The figure in the van was lifting something. Something round. Something that caught the afternoon light. Grenade, Sarah screamed. Time slowed down in the way it does when death comes close enough to touch. Sarah saw the arc of the first grenade as it flew through the air, tumbling end over end toward the gate. Her mind processed it in fractions of seconds, trajectory, impact point, blast radius. The grenade was going to land right next to the guardhouse where Danny stood frozen, his hand on the radio. Down, Sarah launched herself at Danny, hitting him with her full body weight and driving them both behind the concrete barrier that separated the inbound and outbound lanes. They hit the ground hard just as the explosion ripped through the air. The sound was deafening. The concussive wave rolled over them like a physical force. Debris rained down, chunks of asphalt, metal fragments, broken glass from the guardhouse windows. Sarah's ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else. But she couldn't afford to stay down. She pushed herself up, dragging Danny with her. His face was white with shock, but he didn't look injured. Radio command, she shouted, though she could barely hear her own voice. Tell them we're under attack. Another grenade flew from the van. This one was aimed at the gate mechanism itself, the heavy barrier that could be lowered to block vehicle access. Sarah saw it, calculated the distance, and made a choice that would have seemed crazy if she'd had time to think about it. She ran toward the grenade. 3 steps. 4 or 5, she could see it bouncing on the asphalt, could see the smoke trailing from it. She dropped her rifle, scooped up the grenade barehanded and threw it back toward the empty field to the west with every ounce of strength she had. The grenade exploded in midair, 30 feet away. The shockwave hit Sarah and knocked her flat on her back, but the blast went up and out instead of tearing through the gate structure. Shrapnel whistled overhead. Sarah's vision swam, but she forced herself to move. She crawled back to where she'd dropped her rifle, grabbed it, and took cover behind a concrete planter. The van's engine roared. It was moving now, driving directly toward the fence. Sarah's training took over completely. Her hands were steady as she raised her rifle, clicked off the safety, and sighted down the barrel. She aimed for the van's front tire and squeezed the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The tire exploded. The van swerved but kept coming. Second shot. The other front tire. The van dropped, its rims scraping the asphalt, sparks flying. But it was still moving, still accelerating toward the fence. Sarah shifted her aim to the engine block and fired 3 rounds in rapid succession. Steam and smoke began pouring from under the hood, but the van was only 20 yards from the fence now. If it breached the fence, if whoever was inside got onto the base... Sarah. Danny's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. More grenades. She saw them then, 2 more figures in the back of the van, both with arms raised. But the van was slowing now, the engine dying. It ground to a halt 15 feet from the fence, smoke billowing from under the hood. Sarah didn't hesitate. She knew what came next in an attack like this. The grenades had been meant to disable the gate guards. The van had been meant to breach the fence, and now the attackers would try to finish what they'd started on foot. Danny, get inside the guardhouse and lock it down. Radio for backup and medical, move. Danny scrambled toward the guardhouse, keeping low. Sarah moved to a better position, using the concrete barriers as cover. Her eyes scanned the van, watching for movement. The back doors burst open. 3 men jumped out, all wearing tactical vests, all carrying weapons. Sarah saw rifles, saw the determination in their movements. These weren't amateurs. These were people who'd planned this, prepared for this, but they hadn't planned for her. Sarah fired. The first round hit the lead attacker in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard. She shifted aim, fired again. The second attacker dove behind the van, but not before Sarah saw his face. Young, maybe mid-20s, twisted with rage and pain. The third attacker was smarter. He'd already taken cover and was returning fire. Bullets cracked against the concrete barrier Sarah was behind, sending chips of debris flying. Sarah's mind raced. She was pinned down. 3 attackers, maybe more in the van. Danny was secure, but couldn't help. Backup would be coming, but how fast? 2 minutes, 5? A lot could happen in 5 minutes. She heard shouting from the van. Couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. They were regrouping, planning their next move. Sarah checked her ammunition. 23 rounds left in her magazine. 2 more magazines on her belt. Enough if she was smart about it. She popped up from cover and fired 2 quick shots at the van, aiming for the windows. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. She dropped back down as return fire chased her. But now she'd moved to a different position, 3 yards to the left. The attackers would be aiming at where she'd been, not where she was. She came up again, faster this time, and caught one of the attackers in the open, trying to flank her position. 2 shots center mass. He went down and didn't get up. 2 down. At least 1 still active, maybe more. Then Sarah heard the sound that changed everything, sirens. Multiple vehicles approaching fast from inside the base. Backup was coming. The attackers heard it too. There was a moment of confusion, shouting from behind the van. Sarah used that moment to advance, moving from cover to cover, getting a better angle. She saw him then. The third attacker standing up, something in his hands. Not a rifle. Something bigger. A tube RPG. Sarah didn't think. She aimed and fired. Once, twice, 3 times. The attacker jerked with each impact and fell backward. The RPG clattered to the ground, unfired. Military vehicles screeched to a halt behind Sarah. Doors slammed. Voices shouted orders. A dozen soldiers poured out, weapons raised, forming a perimeter. Clear the area. Move, move, move. Sarah stayed exactly where she was, rifle still raised, covering the van. 3 hostiles down, she called out. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. Possible 4th still in the vehicle. Unknown if there are explosives in the van. Sergeant Major Chen appeared at her side, his experienced eyes taking in the scene. Good work, Martinez. We've got it from here. Fall back, but Sarah didn't move. She couldn't. Her entire body was locked in combat mode, every sense heightened, watching for threats. Chen gently put a hand on her shoulder. It's over, soldier. You did good. Now fall back and let the bomb squad handle it. Finally, Sarah lowered her rifle. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline turning to tremors. Chen guided her away from the gate as more military vehicles arrived. Bomb disposal, medical teams, command staff. Danny emerged from the guardhouse, his face still pale. Sarah, how did you... He couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah just shook her head. She didn't have words for it either. The next hour was chaos. The bomb squad secured the van and found enough explosives inside to level half the gate complex. The 3 attackers Sarah had taken down were confirmed dead. A 4th man was found hiding in the van, wounded and surrendering. Medical checked Sarah over. Miraculously, she had only minor cuts from debris and a bruise on her back from hitting the ground. Danny had a sprained wrist. Considering what could have happened, they'd gotten off light. Sarah sat in the back of an ambulance, wrapped in a shock blanket she didn't think she needed, watching the organized chaos around her. Military police were everywhere. FBI had been called. The base was on complete lockdown. Captain Reynolds approached, his face unreadable. Private Martinez, we need to debrief you. Yes, sir. But first... He paused, and something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. First, I need to say that your actions today saved lives. Multiple lives. You engaged hostiles under fire, neutralized the threat, and prevented a catastrophic breach of this installation. That's exceptional work, soldier. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The debriefing took 3 hours. Sarah recounted everything. The initial sighting of the van that morning, her reports to Sergeant Kowalski, the attack itself, every shot she'd fired and why. 2 officers from CID took notes, recorded her statement, and asked questions that ranged from tactical to psychological. When you picked up that live grenade, one investigator asked, what were you thinking? Sarah considered the question. I was thinking that if it exploded where it landed, it would destroy the gate mechanism and kill Private Morrison. So I had to move it. You could have been killed. Yes, ma'am. But I knew I had a few seconds. And throwing it toward the empty field was the best option. The investigator stared at her for a long moment. That's either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever heard, Martinez. Maybe both, ma'am. When the debriefing finally ended, it was past midnight. Sarah was exhausted, running on empty, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying the attack. She kept seeing the arc of those grenades, kept feeling the weight of the one she'd thrown. Sergeant Major Chen found her sitting outside the command building, staring at nothing. Can't sleep? He asked, sitting down beside her. No, Sergeant Major. Won't be able to for a while, probably. Your mind needs time to process what happened. He was quiet for a moment. I trained you in hand-to-hand combat. Remember what I told you about instincts? That warriors develop a sixth sense about danger. That's right. You felt something was wrong all day, didn't you? Even before you saw that van. Sarah nodded. And you reported it, multiple times, but nobody listened. Chen's voice hardened. That's on us, Martinez. That's on every person who dismissed you, who thought gate duty didn't matter, who didn't take your concerns seriously. We failed you today, but we stopped them, Sarah said quietly. You stopped them. If you hadn't been alert, if you hadn't been doing your job with the kind of precision and care that others mocked you for. He trailed off. I don't want to think about what would have happened. The next morning, Sarah was called to the base commander's office. Colonel Patricia Warren was a stern woman in her 50s who'd come up through Army intelligence. Her office walls were covered with commendations and photos from 3 decades of service. Sit down, Private Martinez. Sarah sat at attention. Colonel Warren studied her for a long moment. I've read every report from yesterday. I've watched the security footage. I've interviewed everyone involved, and I've come to several conclusions. Sarah waited. First, you displayed extraordinary courage and competence under fire. Your actions were tactically sound, executed with precision, and directly resulted in saving lives and preventing a major terrorist attack on this installation. Thank you, ma'am. Second, Warren's voice cooled. Our response to your initial reports was inadequate. Sergeant Kowalski has been relieved of his duties pending investigation. The protocols for handling security concerns from gate personnel are being completely revised. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Ma'am, I don't want to cause trouble for... Private, when you joined the Army, what oath did you take? To support and defend the Constitution, ma'am. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Yesterday, 3 domestic terrorists attempted to attack this base. We now know they were part of a larger extremist organization, planning coordinated attacks on military installations across the southeast. If they'd succeeded here, it would have emboldened attacks elsewhere. Warren stood and walked to her window, looking out over the base. You saw a threat. You reported it through proper channels. You were dismissed and mocked. And when the attack came, you didn't freeze, didn't run, didn't wait for someone else to handle it. You acted. She turned back to Sarah. That van you spotted this morning, the one making repeated passes? Our investigation shows they were doing surveillance, timing the gate procedures, looking for weaknesses. If you hadn't been paying attention, hadn't logged those observations, we wouldn't have had the information we needed to track their movements before the attack. Sarah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. The 4th attacker, the one you didn't kill, he's talking, trying to cut a deal. He's given us names, locations, plans for other attacks. Because of you, Private Martinez. We're rolling up an entire network of domestic terrorists right now. FBI is making arrests in 4 states. Warren sat back down. I'm recommending you for the Soldier's Medal for your actions. I'm also offering you a transfer to anywhere you want to go. Special Forces training, military police, intelligence. Whatever you choose. Sarah sat very still, processing this. Everything she'd wanted, everything she'd worked for, being offered to her now. Permission to speak freely, ma'am. Granted. I'd like to stay at Gate 7. Warren blinked. Excuse me? Yesterday proved that gate duty isn't some throwaway assignment for soldiers who can't handle real work. It's the first line of defense. It matters. And I'd like to help redesign the protocols, train the next rotation of gate guards, make sure everyone understands how important this post is. A slow smile spread across Warren's face. You know what, Private? That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in this army. She extended her hand. Request granted. And as of this moment, you're promoted to Specialist. We'll also be assigning you as the primary instructor for the new gate security training program. Sarah shook the colonel's hand, feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Respect. Word of what happened spread through Fort Henderson like wildfire. By the time Sarah returned to duty 3 days later, after mandatory counseling and recovery time, everything had changed. The soldiers who'd mocked her couldn't meet her eyes. Some tried to apologize, awkward and fumbling. Sarah accepted the apologies without comment. She wasn't interested in revenge or making anyone feel bad. She just wanted to do her job. Sergeant Major Chen organized a ceremony at Gate 7. The entire base turned out. Sarah stood at attention as Colonel Warren pinned the Soldier's Medal to her uniform, the highest award for heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy. But the moment that mattered most to Sarah came afterward, when a young female private approached her nervously. Specialist Martinez? I'm Private Jackson. I just finished basic training, and they're assigning me to the new gate security program. I heard you're going to be our instructor. The private was maybe 19, small like Sarah, with the same uncertainty in her eyes that Sarah remembered feeling. That's right, Sarah said. I was scared when they told me I was assigned to gate duty. Jackson admitted. I wanted combat training, real soldier stuff. I thought gate duty meant I'd failed somehow. Sarah smiled. Gate duty is real soldier stuff, Private. It's where you prove that every post matters, that every soldier matters. You protect everyone else by being the one who pays attention when others don't. You be the wall that nothing gets through. Jackson straightened up, and Sarah saw something shift in her expression, uncertainty turning to determination. I can do that, Specialist. I know you can. Report to Gate 7 tomorrow at 0600. We'll start your training. As Jackson walked away, Danny appeared at Sarah's side. He'd been quiet since the attack, processing his own near-death experience. Hey, he said, I never properly thanked you for saving my life. You don't have to thank me, Danny. We're soldiers. We look out for each other. Yeah, but... He struggled for words. I was one of the ones who didn't take this seriously, who treated gate duty like a joke. And you? You showed me what a real soldier looks like. So thank you for that too. He saluted her, not because regulations required it, but because he meant it. Sarah returned the salute. That night, alone in her quarters, Sarah pulled out the photograph she kept in her footlocker. It showed a young soldier in dress uniform, her father, taken a month before he deployed to Afghanistan for the last time. I did good today, Dad, she whispered to the photograph. I hope you're proud. She could almost hear his voice responding, the way she imagined it in her quietest moments. I was always proud of you. Mija. Always. Sarah placed the photograph back in the footlocker, next to her newly awarded soldier's medal. Tomorrow she'd be back at Gate 7, training the next generation of guards who would stand between danger and everyone they'd sworn to protect. They'd laughed at the girl guarding the gate until grenades started flying, until she'd proven that courage has nothing to do with size or gender, until she'd shown them that sometimes the most important soldier on the base is the one standing at the gate, paying attention when everyone else looks away. Sarah Martinez had faced the fire and emerged stronger. And now, she'd make sure every soldier who came after her understood that no post was too small, no duty beneath notice, and no guardian was defined by anything except the strength of their commitment. The gate would always be protected. She'd make sure of that.